And thank you very much for the report, and thank you also very much for all your work after the explosion. It was a really unusual event, a very devastating event, and also an event that could have happened anywhere. Disaster can strike any community. In this case, it happened to be New Ferry and Port Sunlight. One of the highest risks that the Merseyside Resilience Forum identifies is flooding. We have a lot of coastline on the Wirral, so we've all got an interest in learning the most lessons that we can learn from this incident, so that the next time disaster strikes, wherever it is and from whatever cause, that we know that we're in safe hands and that we've learned and made changes for disaster response going forwards. One of the first things that often happens in disasters is the report mentions it was declared a major incident. But this is confusing to a lot of people because there was no public reports of it being a major incident. And later on, it says a Gold Command meeting was scheduled for the next day. And then there's no report of that Gold Command meeting that I can see. There was an on-site meeting, but Gold Command, a strategic coordinating group, would normally be held off-site. It'd be a meeting of very senior managers who would scope what was happening and lay in resources for the short-term and for the long-term recovery. So I'd be grateful if you could talk more about that, and also just bearing in mind the report that the independent report into flooding, particularly in Morton from September 2015, that also said that a major incident was not declared. This is a result of the council not being aware about the number of properties that were affected until much later in the day. And it also talks about the need for coordination and communication between members at the senior level.
Okay, Chair, through you, if I may. So in terms of the declaring it a major incident, which I think is the main emphasis of the question from Councillor Bird, I know we've spoken about this previously in terms of the gold incident. So the way the emergency planning plans are set up, any agency can call and declare a major incident. However, upon arriving at that scene, as one of the first council officers arriving there with David, I was met with the chief fire officer who was there on site and controlling the scene, and he, in essence, set a term that we'd probably use called battle rhythm. So in essence, I suppose, certainly myself as the council officer who responded at that time, I probably defaulted to the experience of the chief fire officer who was in place on that location at that time, dealing with the acute phase of that incident. We, at that stage, didn't know, and he didn't know, whether there were people missing or what was the scale of the whole event at the time. But in essence, he was the lead officer in terms of that event. So if he called the incident and managed that incident as he saw fit as the lead agency, I suppose, in terms of that acute phase.
So there wasn't a meeting of the strategic coordinating group then?
So there was a meeting of people on site and on scene at that time, but in my experience, that was different than what would normally be a strategic coordinating group. Normally, you're quite correct, a strategic coordinating group is called. There's normally a meeting in one of those pre-identified locations. It's normally Bridle Road, the Command and Control Centre. It's normally the police or the fire who will lead that. And we would normally, in that instance, execute or ask a member of the senior leadership team to go there and represent the council. Having said that, there was David and myself on scene on that site at that time, but it didn't feel like, and you know, I've discussed this with yourself, Councillor Bird, at the time, it certainly didn't feel like a traditional or a typical strategic coordinating group, but I think that was because, like I said, the chief fire officer was there managing the scene on that site, and if in reality, as a council officer, I defaulted to that experience in dealing with those emergencies.